All right, hope you enjoyed the visuals. Now, moving on to the next most interesting panel discussion, which is known as diversity as the mother of creativity, true or myth. I would like to invite our panel moderator for this panel discussion, Ms. Salimka Yordanova. She is CEO at Global Citizen Forum, mentor at Sherry Blair Foundation, ambassador at Global Blockchain Business Council. Welcome, Ms. Salimka. I would like to introduce our panel members, Ms. Monique Custers, CEO, co-founder, Fem Diamonds, Ms. Suzanne Kruger, intercultural consultant, Sukanava, and Ms. Nada Dumit, head of legal for the Middle East at Roche Diagnostics. Welcome you, beautiful ladies. Over to you, Ms. Salimka. On topic, diversity is the mother of creativity. Let's see, is it a true or a myth?
Thank you very much, Saloni, for this great introduction. And thank you very much for the MICE quotient for hosting such an important session and such an interesting session. I would like to welcome the wonderful panel I have the honor to be hosting today and to be moderating. Saloni had a chance to give a brief introduction. We have around 20 minutes to go into a very interesting and very deep topic, and we're four opinionated women, so I guess we might run out of time, but I'm sure we can handle it. So I'd like to just dive in and go straight into the discussion so we can hit it off and make the most out of the time that we're having. Diversity is the mother of creativity is a beautiful saying. I'm pretty sure that no one on this panel would disagree with that statement. However, unfortunately, the world we live in does not necessarily apply the wisdom that it carries. As the current circumstances, the context of the pandemic and the global crisis that it's bringing about definitely requires a lot of creativity on behalf of businesses, governments, institutions, and even individuals on different ways to tackle it. I'd like to start this conversation with Suzanne. Suzanne, you're an interculturalist, and as an interculturalist and a practitioner, you focus on solutions and start with the root cause. This is an extremely interesting approach in this context. So I wanted to hear your views on the interplay between culture and diversity from your point of view. And I'd like to add another layer to this conversation by introducing the cultural factor. To what extent culture facilitates diversity and creativity to thrive and to reinforce each other, and what is your point of view on that?
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for introducing, and thank you for the panel discussion. Yes, I do have a tiny bit of different approach to it, and after I have to admit that I adjusted my response a tiny bit after I listened to Nene Molefi, because she mentioned something which is very, very clear or close to my heart. And I would like to say that we have seen extreme behaviors lately in response to this crisis, and culture has an enormous impact on our health and crisis management. So it has a very, very powerful impact, for instance, on the perception and the treatment of disease. And it has an extremely powerful impact on the response towards authorities' law and how we deal with uncertainty. So, and that is because of what we personally believe to be right and wrong. So we see, for instance, different responses all over the world towards the crisis and the lockdown. And two extreme examples I would like to mention so we can see the difference is South Africa and Sweden, who have very clear, they show very clearly that government's decision and public obeyances or public responses are culturally determined. And so for instance, in Sweden, do I as a citizen trust the government and respect its decision, but also feel trusted and heard as a citizen? Or do I as a citizen obey the authority's decision, reluctantly and actually do not agree with most of it, because I don't really have the same level of trust in the government. And then there is underlying frustration and anger and stress in society. So that will play out at a later stage when we post-corona. And importantly for me is to say that we need to be aware of the different cultural approaches to health and to illness when we're responding to the crisis, and especially to the mental health issue we will be facing when we're dealing with post-corona. And this is so important, because we have all different values and belief system. So to create an awareness, especially amongst us practitioners, is very, very important. So that different cultures have different approaches to, for instance, diagnostics, to prognosis, and to the treatment of mental illness. So every culture has its own way of making sense of this very highly subjective experience of understanding one's own mental illness or mental health, sorry. So whether, for instance, the mental illness is real or just imagined, or whether the illness is an illness of the body or an illness of the mind, or both, and who is at risk and what might cause it. And very, very importantly, the level of stigma surrounding it. So because a risk of stigmatization associated with certain illnesses means exclusion from family and communities in some societies. So based on these cultural influences and ideals, people then decide how they're going to cope with it and whether they're going to seek treatment. So it's extremely important, I would say, to understand that and to be aware of it, so we can tailor our responses toward it later and be more mindful towards mental health issues in families and communities. And I'm sorry if I diverted it a tiny bit, but I felt it's very, very important to mention the cultural and the diverse impact and the diverse ideas about these topics.
Of course, and I'm very glad that you bring in a very interesting perspective and a very interesting angle. And I'm actually very glad that you mentioned the Sweden-South Africa example. I'm originally from Bulgaria, and I was quick to go home before the global lockdown. So I'm spending the pandemic in my home country. But I'm also partly based in Turkey, which are both countries with weak institutional systems and very challenged trust in the government from on behalf of its population. So for example, very large populations in Turkey, let's say, they don't believe that there is coronavirus. They think it's a conspiracy theory and the government just invented it so that they can, engage in some corrupt schemes. So the cultural element and of course the interaction between people, government and institutions is so interesting to observe in such times, because it really comes out on the surface and it becomes extremely obvious. But I wanted to ask you, so you bring in this extremely interesting perspective, as I already said, and I wanted to understand, how do you think different cultural backgrounds, how welcoming they are towards diversity? And would you say that as a result, there is a higher level of creativity in those contexts?
That's interesting. Generally, there can be. But when we're talking about creativity and when we're talking about innovation, we're talking about cognitive diversity foremost, I would say, because it really touches on the point of how do we solve problems? How do we see problems? How do we create solutions for these challenges? And that has everything to do with our cognitive diversity, not necessarily the visible diversity. So yes, in terms of creativity, the cultural impact can be extremely positive when we are aware of it and channel it correctly. So use the context correctly.
There is enough awareness and consciousness around the subject. I completely agree. I'd like to move now to Monique. Monique, you're an innovation director, and in that sense, you're very well equipped to talk about creativity and diversity as the mother of creativity in the context of innovation, which is basically reliant on creative solutions. I know you lead organizations and teams on their innovation journey and direct them to take the stage and function successfully as a multidisciplinary team. I'm sure you doing that, you've faced a number of challenges and you've probably hit a number of walls. I'd like to hear and your perception on the relationship between diversity and creativity, and would you say it's a positive correlation or a negative correlation?
Hi, Susanna and everybody. It's absolutely a positive and contributing match made in heaven between diversity and creativity. But I want to change the statement. I think that diversity is the mother of creativity. So if we all, if with diverse teams with different angles, different colors, different views, that is needed to start a creative thinking and doing journey. It's also been proven with lots of success stories that you need that multiple mindset from both men and women and with different qualities to really come to a good ideation session and come up with new concepts. Only in the last part of an innovation journey, you see if the concepts are there, then you need to scale down to a smaller team with who can get consensus on how to make it the solution work. So I think yes, diversity is the fuel and the food for a creative future.
And what would you say from your professional experience is the largest enemy of diversity? Why can't we have diversity spread its wings and fly and, you know, make us all a lot more creative than what we are? What is standing in its way today?
I think our upbringing. When you're a kid, when we are young, we are all born creative as creative people. We know, we find out and we find our ways how to learn to walk, how to play. We are playful, we imagine, we have our big ambitions, and we are supported to do so. But at a certain age and in the current school system, that stops. Oh, better don't do that. Don't stand out too much. Or we have to fit in this regulation and this thing. So that is the moment where people who have creative thinking of doing, or the ones who are very interested in one subject, they fall out because you have to be in that mediocre community to try further. So we have to have a younger mindset. With the knowledge we have as we age, we have to go back and to explore again our creative skills we have. I know I have worked with young teams, I have worked with students, I have to work with experienced teams with 20 years experience, and they really had to go back, and the young ones had to learn to, why not I? I stand up, I take that stage and I walk it. And that same guts and that same fun also was needed by the elderly again. You have to sparkle their fire, that's already there.
So we need to build systems that don't put the fire out, but rather keep it alive and burning, very much so. Yes,
and that is really methodology and system thinking. Yeah. And if everybody is there for the goal and for the end goal, then if you manage that in the right way and give everybody the stage and to excel in their own experience, then the magic really happens.
There is no, I was going to say the sky is the limit, but actually there is no limit.
There are always limits, because creativity needs a space to be creative, a space to go your own way, but it also needs assets, time, money, location to work, your digital on and offline tools, your sketchboarding, and it needs trust from those who initiated the project or initiated the stage. they have to be supportive and stay there for not half a year, not a year. The magic happens after a few years, and they have to stay there at birth and at maturity of that creative process.
It needs time, space and time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd like to turn the discussion now towards our third panelist, Nada. Nada brings a very interesting, I would say, geographical perspective to the conversation, because I believe, Nada, you're originally from Lebanon, am I correct?
Correct, yes.
You're originally from Lebanon, and you work and have experience with the Middle East and the reality that is taking place there, which I find very interesting. I myself have lived in the Middle East for 5 years, so I keep it very dearly to my heart. Tell us, you know, from a geographical standpoint, from a regional standpoint, what is your view on creativity and diversity, and what do you think? What is the current state of affairs, and what is holding it back from progressing further?
First of all, thank you very much. I'm really, really happy to be here. It's not a topic I get to elaborate on every day, and I just want to bring a personal view on the topic. You know, as Raj, we have a presence in the Middle East. We have a very strong presence in the Middle East, and we are one of the most innovative company, and Raj has heavily invested in being innovative and so on. And because we are innovative, we don't do business out of, you know, Switzerland only. We have a presence across the world. And speaking about the region, we were one of the first IBD companies to establish a direct presence in the Middle East. We are in Dubai. We are further expanding our presence in the Middle East and so on. So diversity is in our DNA. We have a very diverse team. We are 450 people in the region. We have 42 nationalities, and it's not just a number. So I'm not here to put on statistics. I think diversity is the real acceptance of the other. I think one of the main challenges, I mean, of course, we can talk about prejudice, we can talk about professional communication being misinterpreted, we can talk about conflicting working styles, we can even talk in certain cases about local legislation or local framework offering a certain limitation to diversity. But most importantly, I think it's the fear of the unknown, of the fear of something or someone that's different from us, that doesn't have the same history, that's not part of the same generation, not part of the same country, and so on and so forth. So the real challenge, in my opinion, is fear. And the real way to overcome it is the deep belief that everybody has something to offer to you. Everybody can contribute to your personal growth, to your professional growth, to broadening your perspective.
I completely agree. And actually, Dubai is one of the best places in the world when it comes to diversity, because it's practically made out of an expat community, which is so rich and so colorful. And it's truly enriching. And I think it's one of the places in the world where diversity thrives in a very peaceful way, with little, you know, relatively speaking, with little tension between the different communities. And I would say it's a success story in the context of diversity as a city.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So could you share an example, like an example from your career where you've been faced with, you know, a diverse sort of context, and a creative outcome came out of that, which led to better results?
From a personal point of view, I can tell you, I started my career in a law firm in Lebanon. I moved to a regional company here in Dubai, and then to a multinational. And my personal and professional growth has, you know, substantially increased. And a big part of it is that I learned so much about other people. I learned so much about other ways of thinking. And I felt that all this time I was somehow stuck in this own perception, my own perception, and now it has broadened. And I think, again, I go back to, I would like to share a quote with Severin Schwan, our CEO, who says that I fundamentally believe that diversity of people enhances innovations. The different ways of thinking foster creativity, but just having diversity is not enough. we have to embrace and appreciate each other's diversity to translate it into novel ideas. That is why inclusion of people is so important. And I can refer to an example of Roche. Because of its geographical diversity, Roche was exposed early on to the COVID-19 virus, eventually through China. So with that experience, not only did we acquire the scientific and medical knowledge to start working early on the test, we also experienced what it is to have people, going on lockdown, what it is to ensure that our safety are updated, that we have all the equipment for our engineers to go to the labs and maintain these instruments that test the coronavirus. And so, I don't want to elaborate too much on how much innovation is important to diversity. I think this goes without saying. If you Google it, it's everywhere. It's in Harvard Business Reviews, it's in McKinsey reports, it's everywhere.
I'm glad that you mentioned that in the last part of your statement, because this is exactly what I was going to turn the conversation to. It's everywhere. It's measured. It's scientifically proven. It's widely accepted and talked of. However, unfortunately, the data and the practical implications of diversity are far behind from the knowledge and level of awareness that the world is sort of demonstrating. And even though it is very clear that diversity is the key to innovation, to creativity, to growth, and so on, it is still being severely overlooked, and especially so in big businesses, in corporations, and in governments. And when I say governments, I don't mean less developed countries or non-democratic governments. Even G8 countries are falling far behind from the diversity agenda they should be driving forward for their region and for their partners. One example is for example, Canada, because the organization that I'm running is Canadian by origin. So we follow the trends. Canada is falling severely behind on their diversity agenda, and it's one of the most important countries in the world. So we have a massive gap between what we know about diversity and between how well are we actually using that. And we said earlier in the discussion, Monique actually mentioned that for diversity to actually start, to be integrated into our system as humans, it needs to be integrated in the systems from early days. That requires a systemic change. Systemic changes are very difficult, but we do find ourselves in very unprecedented times, which usually set the scene for unprecedented changes. So I'd like to go back to Suzanne and ask her, would you say that a systemic change is possible today? And would you say that post-COVID-19, we would wake up, so to speak, in a world where diversity is actually being implemented? Sorry, you need to unmute.
Yeah, sorry about that. I do hope that we're actually learning as a society and as practitioners a lot from this. What I completely agree with, and it was mentioned by Monique and also Nada, it's the mindset and it's the fear. Because diversity, we're talking a lot about diversity, but it's actually all around us. So what I think we should focus on is inclusion, because without inclusion first, diversity can cause more trouble than benefit. Yeah. So I completely agree with in the systemic change in terms creating the context, so creating the policies and procedures to actually allow visible diversity to grow and to create quality on that. But from my point of view, we need to focus on inclusion and on practicing inclusion. And we had the question before, why is there so much failure, or why do we always see it as an enemy? And I believe it's because we're not going down to the root causes. So we're focusing on the symptoms, but we don't focus on the root causes because it's extremely uncomfortable and it takes time and effort to change these root causes, right? That means our mindset. So there is no quick fix to it. And I think that's why we often use a lot of engagement programs and spend a lot of money on training and coaching without tackling the root causes. And I think that's a problem. That's the problem. And in terms of stereotyping too, and in terms of changing, we have to, completely agree with Monique there, we have to start at a younger age. We have to actually include those changes and those policies into school already, into universities, and then into the corporate world. And we have to start at home with how do we bring up our children? You know, what question do we ask? How do we, what kind of mindset do we have for education? Because that actually makes the difference. And the superficial layer in terms of gender, age, and race, is it helpful? Not necessarily, always. So it's about inclusive leadership, and it's about self-inclusion and self-management. And I also believe, and may I conclude this, when we talking this, we do actually need a new way of thinking. So the new way of thinking is the way we have now. Is it really solving our problems going forward? Is our linear thinking enough for the complex world we're experiencing, and we're going to have after Corona? So when business models change and when policies and procedures change, also our mindsets have to change.
Yes, it's a chicken and an egg situation though. Which one is going to go first?
it actually is, in a way, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Please.
Yeah, I love what Suzanne mentioned, and I want to add another ingredient, that is eagerness. Creativity and standing your ground is born from eagerness. You want to be there, you want to do that. There is a personal urge which often you even can't tell the hows and the whys, but it's in you, and then you start acting like that. So to allow young people, older people, people in your organization who have that eagerness and have that little twinkle inside, to give them the space and to nurture them and to say, oh, okay, something is buzzing here, something is happening here, you have goosebumps, so go and find it out, lead us, and come back and make us acquaintance of your idea and where you're leading us, because that's our really learning and discovery moments, and that needs support to be supported more. And we as a whole, I think, to give the stage for those who already lead and walk the talk, practice what they preach. Nobody knows their names. Have you seen them? We don't see them often. We know the great men, we know the creative men. We need a museum of men and women together hanging on those walls, and that we know the namings, and that we give great men and women who drive in inclusive and diversity to take the stage, share their lessons learned, share their personal lessons, the downfalls and the pitfalls, but also show what they have achieved. And that achievement and those life stories, they are learning lessons, and we can duplicate them, use them as a blueprint, and even to others to say from, oh, if he or she can do that, why can't you, or why can't I? And then the floor is open for everybody to be creative and inclusive.
That's fantastic. So Suzanne wrapped it up with inclusion. Monique wrapped it up with creating a safe environment for creativity to thrive, and a way to celebrate creativity and encourage it. Nada, what would your concluding words be in terms of what's missing in the diversity mix today, and how do you think the once we get out, or hopefully, you know, in the near future, the current crisis comes to an end, what do you think would be the one thing that would change and drive this agenda forward?
Yeah, I think, you know, like Susan and Monique discussed, this effort should start from within, because you can have, you know, all these programs, you can have the CEO supporting this, you can have this as targets, you can have everything you want. It will remain on the surface, and it will remain a very shallow exercise unless we change our real perspective and we believe that there is growth in inclusion and in diversity and inclusion. One of the articles I read said, you know, in summary, if we want to summarize this whole situation, diversity and inclusion, it's like workout. It's not comfortable in the beginning. You have to push yourself, but then the benefits you get out of them are huge. So I think we have to take it as such. Yes, people who look like us, who think like us, come to us more naturally, but they don't add much to our lives as much as the people who don't look like us, who have not had the same history and experience like us, and so on and so forth. I think going forward, you know, like every negative has a positive aspect to it. I think this COVID and this lockdown, you know, has proved that being isolated, being only with your own people will not get us too far. I think we really need each other. We really need to open up. We really need to learn the lessons from each other and work together, because that's the only way, you know, we can really advance. Going back to, you know, my own family, my own people, my own thing won't serve us much.
That's absolutely true. I think we managed to fit into our 20-minute slot, and we still